the shadowy world of geopolitics, the most dangerous players aren't always the ones pointing guns. Sometimes they are the ones extending handshakes while pulling strings behind the scenes. This week across the African continent, we witness a pattern emerging, one that forces us to ask a fundamental question about every major player on the stage. Are they genuine partners or sophisticated puppeteers? Welcome to the Strategic Lens. I am Asangwet Luis. There have been an increasing number of you asking me in the comment section that we should start a weekly recap of the hottest stories in Africa. And today we are going beyond the headlines to expose how this single question, partner or puppeteer, reveals the hidden architecture of power across Africa. Because what happened this week wasn't just a collection of separate news stories, it was a masterclass of strategic deception, genuine cooperation, and the blurred lines between the two. Let's begin our investigation. Our story begins with what appeared to be a diplomatic triumph. June 27th, the White House. President Trump hosting peace agreement between Rwanda and Congo. Handshakes, photo opportunities, hope for millions of displaced Congolese. But then came the bombshell. A confidential UN report leaked just days later revealed something that would shake every diplomat to their core. Rwanda wasn't just supporting the M23 in eastern Congo. According to UN experts, they were commanding them. Up to 6,000 Rwandan troops directly controlling military operations. So the strategic question here, was Rwanda a partner seeking peace or a puppeteer orchestrating conflict for leverage? But here is where our UN investigation gets complex. The UN report's timing raises equally troubling questions. Why leak this information just days after a peace agreement? Who benefits from undermining this diplomatic breakthrough? Now consider this possibility. Could the UN report itself be a tool of sabotage? Could external powers uncomfortable with a US brokered peace deal be using evidence to torpedo diplomatic progress? This is the essence of geopolitical manipulation, where the truth becomes weaponized, where evidence serves agendas, where distinguishing genuine partnership from sophisticated puppetry requires extraordinary vigilance. The Rwanda-Congo dynamic will echo throughout our investigation today, because this pattern, the blurred line between partnership and manipulation, is playing out across the continent in ways that will determine Africa's future. But lies and tricks aren't the only story this week. Sometimes real friendship does break through decades of fake games. After 40 years of Uganda's President Museveni using divide and conquer strategy, Uganda's opposition parties did something many thought was impossible. They joined forces. The People's Front for Freedom, Alliance for National Transformation, and other big parties are creating a historic team for 2026 elections. This isn't just another political alliance. This is them destroying Museveni's best trick, keeping his enemies fighting each other instead of fighting him. Now, let's use our strategic lens. Are these opposition leaders really working for change? Or are some of them secretly planning to benefit themselves? Now, remember this pattern. Opposition leaders always fall apart when individual members get offered important government jobs, when the government gives money to certain areas, or when key people suddenly face legal troubles. The big test: can this unity survive Museveni's counter tricks? Because he is not just facing an election, his entire way of staying in power is being challenged. But here's what makes this really important. If opposition unity can work in Uganda, where Museveni has become a master of political tricks, it creates a blueprint for challenging old leaders across Africa. Think about the ripple effects. From Cameroon to Chad, from Equatorial Guinea to Zimbabwe, old leaders who have been in power forever are watching Uganda very carefully. We know that if opposition unity works in one country, it could inspire movements across the continent. While some African countries are dealing with complicated relationships with outside powers, others are writing completely new rules. Zambia just pulled off one of the smartest moves I've seen in many years. They bought a 26% ownership share in Angola's huge Lobito oil refinery, not as customers, not as people asking for help, but as owners. By 2026, refined fuel will flow directly to Zambia through a special pipeline, cutting costs by 15% and ending their dependence on unpredictable global markets. This is real partnership in action. Two African countries combining their resources, sharing knowledge, creating benefits for both without outside puppet masters pulling strings. Now look at how smart this is. Instead of every country building separate refineries, they are working together for maximum efficiency. Instead of competing with outside investment, they are creating their own value chains. The amazing vision. Imagine this spreading. Nigeria working with Ghana on cocoa processing. South Africa sharing technology with Botswana for diamond cutting. Kenya and Ethiopia teaming up for textile manufacturing. But here's what makes the Zambia-Angola deal so important for our investigation. It proves that African countries can be real partners with each other, even while they deal with faker relationships with outside powers. Now think about this. Could partnerships between African countries become a defense against outside manipulation? Could real cooperation between African nations reduce vulnerability to sophisticated fakers? The Zambia-Angola example suggests yes, but it requires African leaders to choose real partnerships over competition, long-term independence over short-term gains. In Togo, President Faure Gnassingbe pushed through constitutional changes that could let him rule forever. And here's what's shocking. Gnassingbe's family has ruled Togo for over 60 years. Now think about this timeline. Faure's father ruled from 1967 to 2005. 38 years of authoritarian control. When he passed away, Faure took over and has held power for another 19 years. This week's constitutional tricks could make this control permanent. Now let's use our detective lens. Is Gnassingbe really working with the Togolese people to build stability, or is he the ultimate faker, manipulating democratic institutions to serve his country's interests? Look at the evidence. This week, protesters filled the streets of Lomé demanding change after 6 decades of single-family rule. Security forces responded with tear gas and arrests. The pattern we are seeing isn't just constitutional manipulation, it's systemic transformation of a nation into a family business. The Gnassingbe dynasty has perfected the art of democratic faking, using elections and institutions to make hereditary rule look legitimate. Now think about this scary possibility. Could Togo represent the future of African authoritarianism? Not obvious military coups or clear dictatorships, but sophisticated constitutional manipulations that makes permanent family rule appear democratically legitimate. Here comes the uncomfortable question. When a single country rules over a nation for 60+ years using legal tricks, are they governing a country or running a political plantation? This shows perhaps the most dangerous form of puppeting, when the manipulation becomes so built into the system that it becomes normal to outside observers while crushing the hopes of entire generations. But while some leaders manipulate institutions, African innovators are partnering with technology to solve some of the continent's biggest challenges. This week, African scientists used AI-powered drones to fight malaria, achieving 70% reduction in pesticide use and 50% cost reduction. Lives are being saved through African innovation, not foreign aid or outside expertise. Think about how important this is. For decades, Africa has been made to think in its outside partners to solve its own technology challenges. These malaria-fighting drones prove that Africa can be its own technology partner. Meanwhile, in news that barely make headlines, Chinese company Xiaomi got 200,000 electric car pre-orders in just 3 minutes. Not 3 hours, 3 minutes. The company had 200,000 pre-orders of a vehicle it just launched. Innovation is spreading globally. The old centers of technology power, Silicon Valley, European tech hubs no longer control all breakthrough thinking. Look at this pattern. African drones fighting malaria, Chinese companies destroying Tesla's dominance, innovation emerging from the global south while traditional powers struggle. The big question as technology spreads, as innovation moves beyond traditional centers, will all power structures adapt to real partnership or double down on puppet relationships? But our investigation this week uncovers something that shows the friend or faker dynamic in its clearest form. At UN headquarters, Special Representative Michael Fakhri didn't just criticize European governments, he exposed their fundamental hypocrisy with surgical precision. His accusation: European nations refused to arrest Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu, despite ICC warrants, while historically arresting every African leader the ICC wanted. His exact words:
he said in this public interviews that many European political leaders were surprised because they said that the ICC was designed to go after African leaders. So then when European countries, being consistent in saying we're not going to honor and adhere to these arrest warrants, is a continuation of their racism. Not just hypocrisy, their racism.
Look at the numbers. The International Criminal Court has issued 31 arrest warrants in its history. When they finally issued warrants for known Africans, Israeli and Russian officials, European cooperation suddenly became complicated. This isn't real partnership in justice. This is faking disguised as law. For years, African leaders argued the ICC was biased. European leaders dismissed this as making excuses. Now European governments' own selective enforcement proves exactly what Africans alleged. Think about this deeper meaning. If international law applies differently based on race and power, then institutions like the ICC aren't instruments of justice, they are instruments of control. The revelation: modern faking operates through institutions that claim moral authority while serving hidden political interest. The pattern is clear. This week showed us the fundamental structure of power in contemporary Africa. Rwanda, Congo, either real partnership undermined by sabotage or manipulation disguised as diplomacy. Uganda's unity, either genuine democratic partnership or temporary alliance vulnerable to internal fakers. Zambia's investment, real African partnership creating mutual prosperity. Togo's manipulation, constitutional faking serving 60 years of family rule. African innovation, genuine technological partnership between African creativity and global resources. ICC Racism International puppeting disguised as justice. Every relationship in contemporary Africa exists somewhere between genuine partnership and sophisticated faking. The skill lies in recognizing which is which. The answer lies in what we have done today. Apply consistent detective work, asking uncomfortable questions and refusing to accept surface stories. The Rwanda question, friend or faker, isn't just about one conflict. It's about developing thinking skills necessary to navigate an increasingly complex world. Africa's future won't be determined by avoiding manipulation. That's impossible. It will be determined whether African leaders and African people can tell the difference between real friendship and sophisticated faking. Pick one relationship today: Rwanda-Congo dynamics, Uganda's unity, Zambia-Angola's cooperation, and use this lens in the coming weeks. Watch how events unfold. By developing these detective skills, by asking uncomfortable questions, you are not just watching analysis, you are developing the strategic thinking Africa's future depends on. In your own relationships, how often do you ask whether you are dealing with real friends or sophisticated fakers? Choose one story that challenges how you thought. Research deeper, question your reactions, find evidence that contradicts what you want to believe. That's strategic thinking in action. What story surprised you most? Which relationship would prove to be real friendship versus sophisticated faking? Share your analysis in the comments. These conversations matter for Africa's future. Until next week, keep your lens strategic, your questions uncomfortable, and your analysis brutally honest.